Hey everybody, welcome back to the Consumer Warrior Podcast. The podcast is dedicated to helping you with your big debt problems. If you're just dabbling in debt, this isn't the podcast for you. We deal with the big debt problems here: repossession, foreclosure, lawsuits, bankruptcy, and all the other horrible financial problems that are out there. We help you to help yourself. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, John Skiba, and I'm a consumer protection attorney in the state of Arizona. And on today's episode of the podcast, I'm actually pretty excited about this because I'm going to launch a kind of a mini series of topics that we're going to talk about, and it all relates to this guy and this book, Dave Ramsey and his book, The Total Money Makeover. And I'm going to talk about some of the debt myths that he has in his book and whether I agree with them or disagree with them, and how they can impact you. But before I do that, I want to thank our sponsor for today's episode, which is the Consumer Warrior Project. If you're finding yourself dealing with some pretty serious debt problems, maybe you're dealing with a lawsuit from a debt collector, you're facing bankruptcy, you're looking at trying to settle your debts, it can be pretty overwhelming just trying to navigate the court system and the legal system that surrounds consumer debt problems. That's why over at the Consumer Warrior Project, you can find different templates, forms, downloads, tutorials, all that can guide you through the process and help you as you work to get out of debt. All right, so let's talk about Dave Ramsey here for a bit. Dave Ramsey is a guy that I think is fantastic. I think that his approach to dealing with debt problems is that there's so much wisdom in the way that he does that. And I remember the day that I actually bought this book, The Total Money Makeover. And it was actually when my wife and I were a fairly young married couple. We were driving from our home in Arizona up to visit my family who live in Utah, and we happened to stop at a gas station to get some gas at a place called Cordes Junction in Arizona. And I remember we were looking for something to read or to discuss as we were going on this drive. If you've ever driven from Phoenix to Salt Lake, you know that there's a lot of road in between those two cities. And so we saw this book there for selling the gas station. Let's pick this up and read over this. And it's excellent. It's a book. I actually prefer it now on audio, and I listen to it. Dave Ramsey actually reads the book, and it's one of those things where I try to go over it once a year because it motivates me as I try to keep focus on having good financial habits. And that's really what he preaches there. And I should go into this. I don't have any affiliation with Dave Ramsey as far as getting any kind of benefit from this. I just agree with the way that he does things. And because of that, I've incorporated many of his principles into the way that I deal with my law practice in helping consumers to get out of debt. I know this sounds funny because I'm a bankruptcy attorney, and Dave's big mantra is that he doesn't like bankruptcy. I agree with that as a bankruptcy attorney. Nobody likes to file for bankruptcy. It's just sometimes it's actually necessary. So I've had a kind of a long track record of following the Dave Ramsey principles. I actually had the opportunity to go out to Nashville and go to the headquarters there, see him do the radio show, and actually got to have dinner at his house with a bunch of other bankruptcy lawyers, which is kind of a strange setting. But just an opportunity to talk to him and get his ideas and inputs on finance. And so I'm really excited in this next series of episodes of the podcast. I thought I would go over some of the debt myths that he has in the first couple chapters of the book. So if you haven't read this book, I highly recommend that you take a look at it. And the first few chapters goes over some of the myths that people have and misconceptions that they have about debt and the way that they think that it can benefit them. So this will be multiple episodes. And what I thought I would do is start off by reading some of the ones that I think are relevant to my law practice and people who are dealing with really serious debt problems, and how maybe some takes on them if I think that they're accurate or not. Okay, now I'm just going to do two today in this episode. And here, I'm just going to actually read over these. The first myth that he discussed, and he says, if I loan money to friends and relatives, I am helping them. Here's what he says the truth is. If I loan money to a friend or a relative, the relationship will be strained or destroyed. The only relationship that would be enhanced is the kind resulting from one party being the master and the other party being a servant. Next page, he has one that goes right along with this. The myth is that by co-signing on a loan, I am helping a friend or relative. He says the truth is that be ready to repay the loan. The bank wants a co-signer for a reason, which is that they don't expect the friend or relative to pay. Now, I wholeheartedly agree upon this. And as my wife and I read this, I remember we had the discussion that if our children, and I have 6 children, we have a big family, and as my kids are getting older now, and as they eventually leave the home and get married, often newlyweds will come to parents for help. We always want to be able to help our children. We always want to freely give to them if we can. But that's the thing, is that we want it to be a gift. I don't ever want to loan my kids money because I don't want it to strain the relationship. I think that people that have gone through this have found, even when the person loaning the money is having the best of intentions, is not doing anything to try to collect on it or make things weird, the person who receives it initially, they're grateful for it. But then as time goes on, they realize it strains the relationship, because there's always this feeling of, I owe this person money. And on top of it, now this is the person that I sit with at Thanksgiving dinner. This is the person, that there's a family relationship there as well. And so I agree with him 100% that it can cause some really strained relationships. Let me give you some other things to think about this. What I see as a bankruptcy attorney, I see families that are forced into bankruptcy because they co-signed on somebody else's loan. This isn't just, these are real life examples that Dave talks about in the book, and I see them in that people, you are liable on that debt. If you co-sign on a debt with a family member, friend, whatever it is, and they can't pay, or worse yet, they go through bankruptcy, it's going to fall 100% on your shoulders, and you are going to be responsible for it. So think about that next time you've been asked to co-sign on a car or something like this, is if that person doesn't pay, are you in a position to be able to actually cover that loan yourself? I had a heartbreaking consultation a few years back where this woman had come into my office. She was retired. She was nearly 70 years old, and she had co-signed on the student loans of her prior son-in-law. Now, and that's because her daughter and her husband, her son-in-law, had gotten divorced. And she had co-signed on those student loans, and her ex-son-in-law had then at that point defaulted on the loans and said that he couldn't pay them and had no interest in paying them at that point. There was a little bit of vindictiveness going along here, and she was on the hook. So here she was in her retirement years, 70 years old, and stuck with paying the student loans of a person who was not in her family any longer. And, she looked at me, what can I do in a situation like that? And the opportunities or to resolve that are fairly limited. And a lot, the hard truth of it was that fell on her shoulders now because she had agreed to co-sign that. I see this routinely in my law practice where elderly parents are in financial problems because they have co-signed on loans for their adult children, particularly student loans. I see this a lot. So be very careful, whether it's a loan, whether it's a co-signing on student loans or any other type of loans, a car loan. If you do that, you need to be fully prepared to pay the loan. And if you aren't fully prepared to pay the loan, you shouldn't do it. Same thing goes with loaning family money. If you can help, I say help. But I think it's better to make it a gift if you can do that. If you're financially able to do that, I think that will help the relationship going forward, and you won't have any of this awkwardness. The Thanksgiving dinners won't be awkward because that person can't pay, or they won't pay, or they're just not in a position to pay. So those are some of my thoughts as we kind of dive into this with Dave Ramsey's myths. So I'd be interested to hear in the comments and over the YouTube channel where I post the videos, or the comments over in like iTunes or over at consumerwarrior.com, which is where the podcast is housed online. As far as, your thoughts on this, as far as loaning family money, your experiences with it, if good or bad, I'd be happy to kind of start that discussion to see if that's something that can be a benefit. Something that just in closing out this episode that I'm excited about that I am going to be doing here in the next few weeks is I'm going to become certified as a financial coach through the Dave Ramsey's program. So that's something that I'm going to be adding to my law practice as kind of a holistic way to deal with debt problems. So often what I do as a bankruptcy attorney is kind of like triage. We come in and we solve an immediate problem. but we don't fix the overall problem. And so I'm really excited to do that, is to offer that as another service to people who are dealing with serious debt problems. So that is going to do it for today's episode. Again, I want to thank our sponsor, which is the Consumer Warrior Project. I think I failed to actually even mention the website of where you can find all those courses. That's at legal.coach. If you're watching this at the YouTube channel, you can subscribe here and you'll get all these videos, but you'll notice on the bottom of the screen there, the actual website, www.legal.coach. All right, so that's going to do it for this episode, and I will catch you on Wednesday with another episode with portions of some of these debt myths that Dave Ramsey goes over, and how we can solve this debt problems once and for all. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.